Just how possible it is that grace, the gospel, can replace all the lies of shame. We've been learning about the power of confession and forgiveness and not letting any bitter root spring up in our heart that would defile many. And I'm excited in this session that we're going to be able to really dig in and give some visuals of how shame gets built and how it gets torn down. I have with me my beautiful, wonderful wife, Ann, and welcome, sitting next to me, because I wanted to tell the story of the hidden hornet. I want to tell the story, but I know you could tell it way better than we had been in our church that we were serving, our first church that we'd been serving, and I wanted to be the perfect pastor. I wanted to be there for everybody, and I had drug you out once again to a funeral, not of a member, but of a member's brother. And I had so wanted to be able to minister to this fella. He had been kind of, well, you remember, we had kind of a distant relation. He was a little bit of a porcupine, and we'd gone to the cemetery. It was a hot day, and I'm going to jumpstart the story here to say that we'd been standing over at the graveside. I wasn't officiating, and we'd just gone. Hot day, parked a long way away. Stood next to the graveside, and I was just praying, just hoping that I'd get a moment with this parishioner. Let's call him Sam. And I just want to get a moment with Sam, just to be a pastor to him. And this is his brother had died. And we go over next to this oak tree to stand under the shade. And we're standing there under the shade, and for the first time, Sam begins to open up with me a little bit, and he says, "Yeah, that was the last of my brothers." Began to open up his heart. And I look over at you, and all I can say is that you had a very odd look on your face. And you began to crouch and wince, and I thought you had to go to the bathroom. And I was like, what am I dealing with here? I finally get a breakthrough moment, and my wife is over here distracted. And that's what I was seeing, and you say that I might have given you kind of a shaming look, but I was just wanting this to go well, and okay, we got to tell it fast, pick up the story from there.
Well, I was also committed. We were young when we started in the ministry, and Alan was the senior pastor of a very small church, and I was committed to being the best pastor's wife ever, and that meant supporting my husband. And so we were at the committal service, and it was over 100 degrees. And those cemeteries that are out in the country, and there's not a tree in sight, for miles and miles. And we were out in that cemetery, and we had gotten up. I have to preface, we had gotten up against the tent, where the actual casket was and the family. And there was a crush of people to get in the shade of that tent, and we couldn't quite reach. There were a lot of people had come for this service, and so we had rushed in so that whoever could get in the shade of the tent, and also so that we could hear the little pastor who was doing the service. And he was very quiet, and so we were listening, and there were people behind us and people around us, and Alan and I were in this throng, this crush of people, and we were leaning forward to listen, and I could feel the sweat dripping, down my back. And then I thought I felt something on my legs, and I managed to look down, and I had on a real straight, that was the days where skirts were a little bit longer, and it had a slit up the back, a straight skirt, and I had on heels, and I was standing right on top of a red anthill. And we were all crushed in, and I leaned over to Alan and I said, "Move over." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Move over." So we managed to do about this kind of move, but not enough that I felt secure that I was away from the red anthill. So for the rest of the committal, I just thought, as soon as this is over, I'm running to the car. And then the pastor went on, and I thought, as soon as this is over, I'm running to the car. And so as soon as it was over, I turned to leave, and Alan said, "Look, give me just a moment with this man who was in our congregation and his wife. And so we went and we stood with them for a moment, and both of them were flanking me, and they were looking at Alan. He was across from me. And I was just thinking, I have got red ants crawling all over me. I'm gonna bear up. I'm gonna be a great pastor's wife. And so I stood there, and this went on for a couple minutes, and then I began to feel an excruciating pain, kind of in a private area. And so I began to kind of crouch over, and I looked at Alan as if to communicate, as wives, you know you can, it's time to go, without saying it. And he looked at me with the stop it and get hold of yourself look. And the couple were kind of looking at Alan. They weren't looking at me. And it got worse. The pain got worse. And I realized that just for life and the pursuit of happiness, that I was going to need to get hold of what I thought was a colony of red ants that were setting themselves up. So I just reached back and I grabbed hold of my skirt where that slit was, and I pulled it up to about waist high, and I just reached down and I just grabbed everything that I could get. And I figured I had gotten hold of it, but now it was like a loincloth at this time. The skirt, I had it up right here, and I was holding myself. And I said, excuse me, I've got to go. I've got to go. Get the car. I've got to go. He ran off. He didn't even know how to make an appropriate apology. He ran off through the cemetery for the car, and I wasn't about to let go of this thing, so I just made my way like this through the cemetery, got in the car, and I was so thankful. I've never been thankful for this before or since, but we got in the car. He was a little miffed. But I got in the car and I said, I'm going to throw my skirt up and I'm going to pop it, and something's coming out, and whatever does, you kill it. And when I did, I threw that skirt up and I popped it, and out flew a hornet.
Ooh. It's a good thing there was a
hornet.
Hornet
Very glad
there.
for that hornet. It may have saved my marriage at that moment.
And that is the story of the sting of the hidden hornet.
Yes.